our mayor, Mr. Frank Catalina.
It was a combination of things in my life that were going on at the time. I had basically been in every position in the city. I'm a full-time lawyer, but I served as a housing authority attorney. I served on the school board as a member of the school board. When Mayor Pataki ran, I was a deputy city attorney. Under him, I did city prosecutions. Under Mayor Gibbs, I was the planning board attorney and the zoning board attorney. I served 5 mayors. When Mayor Kelly, John Kelly, became mayor, I became the city attorney. So I've had all these various roles in my city as a lawyer primarily, not an elected official. But I've been out of city government since 2002 and just worked on raising my family and practicing law. And my wife got very sick in 2007. She passed away in 2008. And my kids were off in college, and I found myself all of a sudden, the guy that had everything now was alone and had nothing. Mm-hmm. And I filled the time with watching a lot of TV, going home early, and it just occurred to me that, and through my practice, that a lot of my clients were complaining about getting things done in the city, how difficult it was even for one client of mine to build a single-family house in a single-family neighborhood. It took him 2 years to go through the planning process, and it was just a real hardship for him. And then anecdotally, I would just ask around, because I'd been out of politics, how are things going with the city? Oh, this is terrible, that's terrible, this mayor's terrible, the council's terrible. And one thing led to another, and my vow never to get involved in politics again led me to talk to County Legislator John Testa, former mayor, about the current state of the city. And what I heard anecdotally was actually true when you start looking at the facts. And so the availability of time that I had at the time, in 2009, 2010, led me to become more involved in the community. Well, the condition of Peekskill in general is great. People are, I've infused it with a new spirit of optimism. Anything is possible. We have some financial problems, but we've turned the corner on that. We've had, in the 6 years prior to my taking office, the deficits every single year, structural imbalances in the budget every year, led to $18 million cumulative budget, deficit spending. And that was paid for by reducing a fund balance, unrestricted fund balance of $11.5 million down to $7,500. So that's what it was like when I took office. Now, that fund balance went from $7,500. We're about $500,000 or $600,000. So that's a tremendous increase. Nowhere near the $11 million that we were at, but it's a good increase. And the deficits that in the budget that I inherited, because I didn't vote on the 2014 budget from last year, that budget had some built-in structural problems because it was prepared by the same people who prepared the previous 6 budgets. Mm-hmm. And we doubled down on spending. We told everybody you have to cut departments, that you have to cut back 10 or 15%, which some of them could, some of them couldn't. We ended the year with about a $1.5 million structural imbalance deficit, and we're not happy with that. But considering those average deficits average $3 million a year, I can safely say, and the facts will support, that we cut that deficit in half, and we are headed in the right direction. Primarily the overtime that we cut back on, and just didn't fill vacant positions as they came up. There were many. There were 33 positions cut by the previous administration. 22 people actually lost their jobs. Others were just not vacancies that were filled. But to say that there's really no fat in City Hall to cut. So then we do it by not filling a position. When our corporation counsel retired, he was making $140,000 a year, plus benefits, plus pension, and then we had a deputy deputy city attorney making about $70,000. When he left, she became the attorney, and then we had Harris Beach to help. They came in on a contract about $10,000 a year. Our deputy corporation counsel then took a job up in Dutchess, closer to her home, And we kept Harris Beach on at $10,000 a month. So for $120,000 a year, we're running the legal department, where we cut out 140 plus medical plus benefit, and another 70 or 75 plus health plus medical and pension. So that was a big chunk of savings. The biggest area I don't know the numbers when I say the biggest area of savings, but another big area that we cut back on is these incessant studies that were done by the previous administration. You know, you want to put a traffic light in, they wanted a traffic study first. You want to reduce the speed limit, they want to study. You want to increase businesses to be built along Central Avenue to connect the downtown to the riverfront. They did a $150,000 study. It's insane after a while. I came in and we said, we're not doing any more studies. I've lived here all my life. I know what we can do on Main Street, Central Avenue, Washington Street to build up the businesses and build up the neighborhoods. I know a proposal when I see it that's going to be good for the city, and I know one and can smell one that's going to be bad for the city. So my rule is, as a general rule, we're not doing any studies. The biggest problem to get the finances in order, we can't tax our citizens to straighten this mess out. We have to grow our way out of it. And if you look at, and I had a graph on my State of the City address, total assessed valuation, the properties that are paying taxes. To have healthy growth, any city has to grow between 3 and 5% a year. And that's just healthy growth. The city of Peekskill actually shrunk every year for 7 straight years. Our total assessed valuation. That means that the properties that are being taxed have to pay more just to stay current with current expenses. So we have to grow that. So I'm looking at it and I'm wondering, why are we shrinking so much? Even with the recession that we had, that we've been out of now for almost 3 years, the city's not growing. And I looked around the city, and I've said this many times, in 6 years, 1 commercial building was built, and that was a Walgreens drugstore. You're not going to grow out of it with 1 building in 6 years. Right now, we have 9 major projects being considered. We have 3 major buildings being constructed. We can, and that's not because I'm a great mayor, believe me. It's because there's pent-up demand that has been stifled for 6 years. And now that you have a mayor that answers the phone, that welcomes people in, if somebody comes in and wants to build a 40-story hotel and casino on the riverfront, we're going to say no to him. But I'm not going to say no to him. I'm going to say, listen, we have a 4-story limit. Do you think you can do it in 4 stories? Or in other words, I tell people, not that their project is terrible for the city, but what can you do to change it to make it acceptable? Mm-hmm. They want to invest. We need their investment. Let's not say no, regardless of what they propose. Let's bring their desire to build here and tell them what our parameters can be. There's a number of projects. The first one that I think can have a real significant impact is the Ginsburg Development Corporation's plans for the Abbey, which is on the hillside overlooking the river. Mr. Ginsburg, and you can ask him why he left Peekskill 7 years ago, and he'll flat out and tell you. He's been public, he said it publicly. He didn't think that the new administration was open to development, and they weren't. And he said, it's easier for me just to put a fence around my property and come back when they're gone. And he did come back. And this project that has been dormant now for 7 years, he's proposed a world-class spa and high-income rentals. And of the 70 acres, 65, 70-acre site, he's only going to disturb 4 acres. And he's going to build a world-class trails through the rest of it and put an observation tower similar to what's on top of Perkins Drive. Maybe not as big stone, but there's going to be an observation tower. And then he's going to donate 50, 55 acres back to the city. And what is known as Fort Hill Park, which was a passive park, is going to become an active park because people can actually walk the trails and use the observation tower. So I'm very excited about that. That could add millions of dollars to our total assessed valuation. Mm-hmm. Not to mention the construction jobs, not to mention a bunch of other things. So that's one project. We have Ken Carney came in, and the Carney Corporation on Main Street. There's a block that goes from Main Street all the way back to Diven Street. 190 units are going to go in there. Commercial on the first floor, second, third, and fourth floors. Artist lofts, mixed use, so artist and regular market value apartments. That's a great project, And they've come in, they've asked for a zoning variance on size of apartments. We granted it, or we, meaning our council, granted it. And that's a project that's going to go forward. That's going to start soon. Well, I'm an independent. I ran with Republican backing.
Right.
I was the nominee of the Independence Party, and I had to fight a primary to get it because one guy down in White Plains controls that party and hands out the nominations to who he sees fit. But that's not what the people, the independent people, the people of that party wanted. But when you're in office, you shouldn't govern as a Republican or Democrat. And on the local level, we're not deciding abortion issues. We're not deciding same-sex marriage issues. We're not deciding gun rights. We just don't do that. There is no Republican or Democratic snow and ice. People just want it gone. There's no Democrat or Republican garbage or Democrat or Republican fire. People want these essential services, and that's our job to produce. I have gotten basically 90% of everything that I said that I was going to run. When I ran, I said I wanted to do certain things. And as these projects have come in, and we have an open door, if they needed a variance for this or a special use permit for that, we have, the council has voted for it. And it's not because I am a lawyer, I'm a negotiator, but it's not that, it's not a Republican project or a Democratic project. It's a project that's good for Peekskill. And you have to, and so you just put it up there and let the people put the pressure on their politicians, and then they voted them in. So although we don't have a majority, we haven't really needed it, because the projects that I'm in favor of and the projects that are coming in that we've tailored to meet Peekskill's needs are good for Peekskill. Who's going to vote against that? Well, the driver in the future is what's always driven us in the past, and that's the river. We are a river town. The artist community is, it's like a rudder on a giant ship. It's a very small piece, but it's a very important piece of the ship. They've given us an identity, and that we desperately needed, and they're an integral part of the community. But it's always going to be the river. It's always going to be the fact that we're only 50 minutes by express train into New York City, which is the center of the world. It's a New York arrogance, I guess, but we are the center of the world, and because of that, we can grow. And if you build it, they will come, and that's residential. We're attracting millennials that don't have children, that aren't going to negatively impact our schools. And I've proposed very tough, and I proposed an unbendable legislation to limit building heights in downtown Peekskill to 4 stories. I believe that would keep Peekskill's downtown and keep Peekskill as a city, keep our small town charm. I've also proposed the opening of McGregor Brook from Brown Street, which is right out here, through the center of town, right down to the river. What does that do? That gives us a river walk. Yonkers just did it with Larkin Plaza, and if you go by it on the train, you see it gave life to an inner part of their city that was dying. San Antonio Riverwalk, I posted pictures on the city website of that. We don't have a big river, it's a brook, but anything with water is going to attract development. So I think that we can substantially change the character of our downtown to keep it a small town and keep that small town charm by opening that brook. And because it's not a wide river like San Antonio, it's not the Sawmill River like Mike Spano's trying to open in Yonkers, it can be done relatively, everything costs money, but it's not going to cost zillions of dollars. It might cost a couple of million. It's funny, and I don't think of myself as this old guy. I'm 57, but the change in my life after my wife died, I would never think that I would be sitting here just 6 short years ago. But you never know. I mean, now I'm an old man. I'm getting to be an older man. I'm a bachelor. I don't have a family, so I have all my time to put into this. I have my daughter's my law partner, so she takes up the slack if I have to run off and do an interview like this, or a press conference, or if there's an emergency. So I do have time on my hands. But I grew up here in Peekskill, and it's just an honor to be the mayor, to call myself the mayor, and I try not to get too full of myself. But I do spend extra time combing my hair every day because I am representing the city, and it's just an honor. And as long as the people will have me, I've thought hard as to whether I even want to run again, because it does take a lot of time, and you get the backstabbers and the naysayers, and you say you like flowers, and they'll be out there complaining you don't like balloons. And it's the nonsense gets to me because I'm a lawyer, and my natural instinct is to fight back, and that's what people tell me. Leave the lawyer home. But I am a divorce lawyer, and we don't I can argue all day with you that today is not Friday, but so it's tough. But I would do this job today the way I feel right now. Today I'd take this job forever. As long as the people want me.